Thank you. My name is Alessandra Di Maio, and I wish to extend my thanks to the city of Florence for promoting this important occasion of encounter among public administrators, policymakers, and the civil society, for inviting us to reflect together on how to implement resilience in our communities, in our cities. As an academic who strives every day to apply theory to practice, always engaging the young citizens whom I contribute to educating, I'm particularly grateful. My main field of research is migration. I've been working for a long time on how migration, especially from Africa to Italy, impacts communities and how it contributes to the development of cultural identity in cities and societies at large. And I'm using the word development because, as we know, identity is always a dynamic concept. Like Kamin Mohammadi powerfully stated before me, I am also specifically interested in stories, in migrant stories that deconstruct stereotypes, problematize dominant narratives, especially in stories told by migrants who are resilient narrating subjects rather than nameless narrated objects. In particular, I'm interested in exploring how all migrant stories, written stories, visual stories, intersect, talk to one another. I'm convinced that if we reset the power balance among narratives, we can effectively start to build a process of peace in which everyone's rights are respected and all individuals enjoy equal dignity. I'm also convinced that cities can and should play a crucial role in this peace process as major sites of resilience, since they, number one, embrace resilience through community engagement and social inclusion. Number two, promote collaboration by creating a culture of innovation in which community members are permitted and encouraged to participate. And number three, lead transformation, requiring that every institution, organization, and individual is increasingly engaged, collaborative, and action-oriented. I'm going to offer a couple of examples today, beginning with a reflection on migration as we experience it today, here and now. Migration is a social phenomenon as old as the world, but the scale and frequency of today's migratory movements are unprecedented. Numerous groups of people from the four corners of the world are engaged in crossing global borders. In the past decades, the Mediterranean has become one of the world's most critical sites of mass migration. People from the Maghreb and sub-Saharan Africa have crossed the sea south to north, risking their lives, hoping to find refuge, democracy, and better life conditions in Europe, often at the mercy of internationally organized criminal traffickers. The name of this boat, upon which I stumbled while walking on a solitary beach in my native Sicily, is eloquent for those of you who can read Arabic: defiance. As sociologist Saskia Sassen suggests, migration is patterned and follows specific routes. One of the migrants' most trodden routes is the passage Libya-Italy. Hundreds of thousands of people of different nationalities, millions, some say, have crossed the Sahara from East, West, and Central Africa. After a long journey, which often includes extended detention in camps that are actually prisons, mainly in Sudan and in Libya, the people who survived the first leg leave the Libyan shores for Sicily. Most of them head towards the small island of Lampedusa, Italy's most southern territory, only 60 miles away from the African coasts. Yet, the crossing is not always accomplished. On October 3rd, 2013, a boat sailing from Zuwara, Libya, sank only a few miles away from the coasts of Lampedusa. It was by no means the first decrepit vessel that sank upon crossing. But that time, due to the proximity to the island and the favorable marine streams, The consequences were visible to the world. Hundreds of corpses soon floated all over the shallow waters of Lampedusa's shoreline, reaching what that year was voted by TripAdvisor the most beautiful beach in the world, the stunning Isola dei Conigli that you can see here. The images of these dead bodies retrieved by local fishermen, Coast Guard officers, and frontier soldiers have remained impressed in everyone's minds. Recently, we have seen them reproduce as footage in Gianfranco Risi's powerful documentary Fuoco a Mare, Fire at Sea, entirely filmed in Lampedusa, currently nominated for an Academy Award as Best Foreign Film. A group of citizens has mobilized, forcefully asking the state to make October 3rd a national day of remembrance on which to commemorate those who have not survived what some scholars call the Mediterranean passage. Regrettably, this was by no means the only shipwreck that has taken place in what elsewhere I've called the Black Mediterranean, and of course the reference is to the Black Atlantic. Across the years, shipwrecks like casualties have been numerous and countable, more often than not, undocumented. While Italy, Europe, and the world continue to watch in the face of blatant, prolonged human rights violations, failing for a number of reasons to implement international policies that can stop this carnage, the civil society, amidst controversy, is actively responding to one of the oldest human impulses, mourning through commemoration. Without commemoration, there is no past, there is no history, there is no legacy for the future, there is no effective rescue. Where international policies fail, citizens succeed in embracing resilience, leading transformation from within their communities. I wish to share two experiences of commemoration with you today. Symbolically, today is the day on which we commemorate the dead in Italy. The first involves social mobilization through flash mobs, whereas the second is an example of public memory through monumentalization. In both cases, cities are agents of resilience expressed through collective solidarity. A flash mob was staged in Milan on February 14th, 2015, last year, to commemorate the victims of a yet another tragic shipwreck that had occurred a few days earlier not far from Lampedusa. On Valentine's Day, hundreds of people responded to the call launched by Radio Popolare, the most popular listener-supported radio station in Italy, known for its progressive and liberal political orientation. A few hundred of men and women of various age, including students, some of my students, gathered at the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele, the city's most elegant shopping gallery that you can see here on the screen. They laid down on the floor, wrapped in white sheets, with Prada and Louis Vuitton shop windows serving as a backdrop, to commemorate in solidarity the dead of the Mediterranean. It was a well-participated flash mob in the name of love, as the spirit of Valentine's Day required. No screams, no picketing, just a crowd of peaceful people covered with white sheets, mourning together their deceased brothers and sisters in a heavily symbolic public space, Milan's fashion gallery, the Italian dream. The missing black bodies were represented by a group of Italian white ghosts in shrouds, gathered to remember those who had tried but did not survive the crossing. Cultural political action was enacted in Milan by a group of citizens who, tired of being passive spectators of a tragedy of epic proportions, became effective performers of a symbolic act of resistance. The idea of this flash mob did not come out of the blue. A couple of years earlier, in July 2012, let's hope that this video opens. A couple of years earlier, in July 2012, a group of young people wearing black and brown t-shirts walked down the winding roads of Rabbit Island at sunset, holding protest posters written in several European languages, asking Europe to create humanitarian corridors for refugees, eventually forming a large SOS sign in the water. The color of the t-shirts was intended to suggest a sense of identification with the black and brown bodies who had lost their lives in those waters. And I'm afraid the video doesn't open, but this is how the flash mob was performed. 2 years later, a few months before the Milan event, another commemorative flash mob had been staged in Lampedusa on occasion of the first anniversary of the October 3rd shipwreck. Let me try to show you. Here. It was not the first flash mob organized by Amnesty International in the waters of the small island, but it was the first where participants entered the water in white shrouds, symbolically reverting power relations. However, for obvious reasons, the images from Lampedusa did not go viral like those taken in Milan. Lampedusa is not as appealing as Milan's gallery. In the world's imagination, Lampedusa is a frontier outpost, a liminal space, geographically closer to Africa than Europe. It does not fully represent the attainment of the European dream. It's just the door to Europe. However, through the symbolic practice of participation through flash mobs, the small island at the frontier and Italy's fashion capital have been connected. Now, if flash mobs requiring collective participation temporarily transform potential bystanders in performers of symbolic acts of resilience, monumentalization sets the ground for long-term public memory. Last year, in March 2015, the mayor of the city of Catania, Enzo Bianco, inaugurated a mausoleum in the city's cemetery to commemorate 17 people who had lost their lives crossing the Mediterranean the year before. Their corpses were found once again in the waters around Lampedusa. However, the island's small cemetery was so full at the time that Lampedusa's mayor announced, I'm quoting, bodies could no longer be accommodated. In 2013, when she had just been elected mayor of Lampedusa, Giusy Nicolini had written an open letter to the European Union, urging its institutions to contributing more incisively in the rescue and assistance of migrants and refugees who were arriving in mass. In her famous letter, Nicolini claimed that Europe should reconsider its immigrants' policies in light of the tragic shipwrecks that were becoming increasingly common. The closing paragraph of the letter reads as follows. Everyone, I'm quoting, everyone must know that it is Lampedusa, its citizens, its units dedicated to providing assistance and hospitality. It's Lampedusa that is giving human dignity back to the people who arrived, that is giving dignity to our country and to Europe altogether. Well, if these people are just Lampedusa's people, then expect to receive telegrams of condolences for each person who has drowned, as if each of them had white skin, as if each of them were one of our sons who has drowned while being on holiday, unquote. Mayor Bianco from Catania responded to Nicolini's plea. Not only did he offer the 17 victims a burial place by commissioning an interreligious space in his city's predominantly Catholic cemetery, but he also had engraved on each of the 17 gravestones a verse of a recent poem by Nigerian Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka, the first African writer who was awarded a Nobel Prize in Literature 30 years ago. The poem, Migrant, is a powerful reflection in precisely 17 verses on exile and migration. It can be read in a sequence, a line on each tomb, from upper left to bottom right, and also appears in its entirety on an adjacent tombstone. Also, at the center of the mausoleum piazza, you can notice a statue. Commissioned to Catania's Academy of Fine Arts by the mayor on behalf of the city. Shipwrecked Hope, this is the title of the 9-feet-tall statue, is made of local lava stone from Mount Etna and portrays an allegorical ungendered figure named Hope, that you can see in the middle, emerging from the waves of the sea. Students and teachers worked together on its making. These photographs were taken during the inaugural ceremony of the monumental complex last year. It was an interreligious ceremony in which Catania's Catholic bishop, Sicily's imam, and the high priest of the Coptic Orthodox Church in Sicily participated together with the victims' relatives and friends in the much-needed spirit of religious tolerance and human solidarity. The high priestess of the ceremony, however, was poetry, as intended by one of the greatest living artists and intellectuals, Wole Soyinka, for whom the creative process, making art, remains one of the most concrete forms of resilience and resistance within any community. It's no accident, I believe, that we are here today. Let me conclude quoting Soyinka's poignant words from the preface to the anthology containing the poem Memorialized in Catania, which has just been published in Italy. I'm quoting, "The magnitude of the phenomenon of migration in our present age is a mere reflection of the retrogression that the world has made in the name of progress, having fashioned instruments of war and destruction that now compel us to reckon the tides of human displacement in their hundreds of thousands and millions. Since it is that world of diabolical inventiveness that is largely responsible for this escalation of the phenomenon of displacement, that same world cannot shirk the responsibility of offering its victims the rudimentary needs of shelter and protection," unquote. In conclusion, it is my conviction that only when this responsibility is met, when cities assure all their citizens shelter and protection, overcoming fear of diversity in the name of unity, it is only then that the road to resiliency can become the road to peace. Thank you.